There is a number that should terrify you, and almost nobody knows it. For most of human history, the single most dangerous day in a woman's life wasn't a war, a famine, or a plague. It was an ordinary. It was the day she went into labor. Picture her, somewhere in a firelit shelter. Thousands of years before writing existed, a woman grips the arm of another woman she trusts with her life. Outside, someone is boiling water. Someone else is praying. A child listens from the dark, too young to understand why his mother is screaming, old enough to remember it forever. This scene repeated itself, almost unchanged, for over 1,000 generations. Different caves, different continents, different gods being begged for mercy. Same fight. And here's what should stop you cold. We assume this fight ended with the invention of modern medicine. It didn't. In some ways, doctors made it worse before they made it better. That sentence alone should feel wrong. Stay with it, because it's true. And the reason why is one of the strangest stories in the history of the human body. Start at the very beginning of the problem, because the danger was never an accident. It was engineered into us by evolution itself, and it happened by a kind of cruel coincidence. When early humans stood upright, something had to give in the skeleton. The pelvis narrowed to make walking efficient. At almost the exact same evolutionary moment, the human brain began expanding far beyond anything seen in other primates. Two changes, moving in opposite directions at the worst possible time. A narrower doorway, a bigger arrival trying to pass through it. Nature's solution was almost brutal in its simplicity. Human babies are born earlier, relative to their development, than nearly any other mammal on Earth. Helpless, unfinished, unable to lift their own heads, because staying inside even a few weeks longer could kill both mother and child. We are, quite literally, born too early because being born on time would be too dangerous. That single evolutionary compromise is the reason every birth in human history has carried an element of risk no other species faces in the same way. But knowing the biology doesn't tell you what people actually did when the moment came. That's where the real story begins. Nearly 9,000 years ago, in the dense mud brick town of Çatalhöyük in modern Turkey, families buried their dead directly beneath the floors of their own homes. Archaeologists excavating there found women interred beneath the very rooms where they had once cooked, slept, and given birth, some resting alongside infants who never took a second breath. The living walked daily across the graves of mothers who didn't survive the thing every woman in that town would eventually face herself. Now picture the women who did survive, and the ones who helped them. Almost never physicians. Almost always other women, midwives, carrying knowledge no book recorded, passed hand to hand through whispered instruction and hard-won experience. One of them left a trace we can still read. A woman named Trotula, believed to have lived in 11th century Salerno, is credited with writing some of the earliest surviving medical texts focused specifically on female health, describing real techniques for managing dangerous labor at a time when almost no medical writing acknowledged women's bodies existed at all. For a long time, historians assumed this kind of care was just superstition dressed up as medicine. They were wrong. Evidence suggests these women could reposition a poorly turned baby, control dangerous bleeding, and use specific herbs to speed or slow contractions. Real anatomical skill, refined through repetition, applied without instruments, without anesthesia, and without permission to make a second mistake. And still, the fear never fully lifted. Parish records from early modern Europe show something chilling. In some communities, death in childbirth was common enough that women prepared for labor the way soldiers prepared for a battle they might not return from. Writing final letters, settling old arguments, holding their other children a little longer the night before. Then, in 17th century England, something happened that should have ended centuries of this fear almost overnight. A family named Chamberlain invented obstetrical forceps, a tool that could safely guide a dangerously stuck baby out of the birth canal. saving both mother and child in situations that had killed people for generations. They told no one for nearly 100 years. The chamberlains would arrive at a difficult birth, clear the room of witnesses, cover the mother's eyes, and operate behind a curtained box so that no one, not even the family, could see the device inside it. The secret passed only within their own bloodline, generation after generation, while women in other households died from the exact complication this hidden tool could have prevented. Sit with that for a second. The strangest part of this story was never the invention itself. It's that an entire family chose profit over other people's lives and did it for a century without apparent hesitation. And that single choice sets up the cruelest twist in the entire history of childbirth. Because when doctors finally did take over, they didn't end the danger. For a while, they multiplied it. By the 1800s, wealthy women increasingly gave birth in hospitals, attended by university-trained physicians, convinced this represented the peak of medical progress. But in some of these very hospitals, deaths from a condition called puerperal fever ran far higher than in wards staffed only by traditional midwives. The safer choice on paper was quietly killing more women than the primitive one. A Hungarian doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis, working in Vienna in the 1840s, noticed something almost no one wanted to look at directly. Physicians were walking straight from performing autopsies to delivering babies without washing their hands in between. He suspected the doctors themselves were the danger, carrying something invisible and deadly from the corpses in the morgue to the mothers in the maternity ward. He introduced a simple chlorinated hand-washing routine. Deaths in his ward collapsed almost immediately. His colleagues turned on him anyway. The idea that respected, educated physicians could be unknowingly killing their own patients was treated as an insult to the profession itself. Semmelweis was pushed out, ridiculed, and eventually died in an asylum, largely unrecognized for a discovery that would later become one of the foundations of modern medicine. So the fight didn't end when doctors arrived. It just changed shape, from a battle against biology into a battle against denial. That's the part of this story that should stay with you. We like to imagine safety as a straight line, ancient danger slowly replaced by modern certainty, one invention at a time. Real history was never a straight line. It was midwives learning through devastating trial and error. A family hoarding a life-saving secret for 100 years. Doctors spreading death while believing themselves saviors. One man being right and paying for it with his career, and eventually his life. And underneath every single one of those stories is the same woman from the very beginning, gripping someone's arm in the dark, listening to her own child cry outside the room, wondering if she'll be there tomorrow to answer him. For most of human history, she didn't know if the answer was yes. The fight to survive childbirth was never solved by a single invention, a single doctor, or a single century. It was won slowly, unevenly, by people who kept showing up for each other long after they had every reason to stop. And in more places around the world than we'd like to admit, that same fight is still being fought today.